Love lives here.
Good morning again. So you want to know the secret this morning? Okay, we're going to try to unpack that secret. So Reverend Jeffrey kind of talked about it, gave a little preface of what we're going to be doing for the next couple of weeks. There's going to be a break in there, and there's going to be another speaker. But we're going to be breaking down this book of forgiveness by Bishop Desmond Tutu, written by him and his daughter. This is a really good book to have, and hopefully we can put together a workshop or class on this book and the teachings in this book. And isn't it great that we have this philosophy where we can dive into other things and other books and other authors and get some spiritual sustenance and guidance from these other books and authors? Yes? So this is a good, inspiring book. So in the next 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about the fourfold path of healing ourselves and our lives and our world. And so this book is a guide of harnessing the power of forgiveness and heading us towards healing our lives. But we have to do the inner work first. And so this series that we're doing, I'm hoping at the end of this series that we're going to be able to answer the question, how do we forgive? Because forgiveness is a big thing, right? So this week is telling the story. But I wanted to start off with this idea of forgiveness. As spiritual beings, having a spiritual experience in these human bodies, we all have experienced hurt in our lives, right? At some point of our lives, we've been hurt. And then in some part of our life, we may have been the perpetrators of someone else's hurt. Unintentional, sometimes maybe intentional, but we have been there. So learning to hold ourselves and others accountable and forgive others for what they've done will transform our lives, our relationships. But before we get there, there was a very powerful prayer in this book. And I wanted to read this prayer to you first because it's called the prayer before the prayer. Because sometimes it might take us a minute to get to this idea of forgiveness and even get to this idea of sharing and telling our story to someone else to foster and, that healing. So if you would just take a moment and just maybe close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. This is the prayer before the prayer. I want to be willing to let go, to forgive, but dare not ask for the will to forgive in case you give it to me. And I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready for my heart to soften. I'm not ready to be vulnerable again. I am not ready to see that there is humanity in my tormentor's eyes, or that the one who hurt me may also have cried. I'm not ready for the journey. I'm not yet interested in the path. I am at the prayer before the prayer for forgiveness. Grant me the will to want to forgive. Grant it to me, not yet, but soon. Can I even form the words, forgive me? Dare I look at the event? Do I dare to see the hurt I have caused? I can glimpse all the shattered pieces of that fragile thing, that soul trying to rise on the broken wings of hope, but only out of the corner of my eye. I am afraid of it. And if I am afraid to see, how can I not be afraid to say, forgive me? Is there a place where we can meet, you and me? The place in the middle where we struggle? The place in the middle where the lines are scattered? and we straddle them, where you are right and I am right too, and both of us are wrong and wronged. Can we meet there and look for the places where the path begins, the path that ends when we forgive? So you can open up your eyes. I don't know about you, but I feel that in my soul when I read it. It's a powerful prayer before the prayer. This book was actually written about the struggles of South Africa and apartheid, and how he speaks so brilliantly of, after decades of protest, violence, and bloodshed, the country was being torn apart. And the people feared that the transition to democracy would become a bloodbath as well. However, the people decided, they chose forgiveness. But before we get to forgiveness on this road, there are steps that we have to take. Why forgive? So Ernest Holmes tells us in our teachings that we believe the ultimate goal of life is to be a complete freedom from discord of every nature, and that this is sure to be attained by all. And we believe that heaven is within us, and that we experience to the degree that we become conscious of it. So I like to believe that Nelson Mandela, in his time of incarceration and imprisonment, got to the place where his heart opened up and he was able to forgive. And look at the results of that. After 26 years of imprisonment, becoming the president. Who would ever thought it? So there is hope. There is, we talked about today, the love that we are. So this is what forgiveness is not. It's not easy. It's not weakness. It does not subvert justice. It creates a space for justice. Forgiveness is not forgetting, but it requires fearlessness and remembering of our hurts. Forgiveness is not quick. Sometimes the journey takes several cycles and many years. But why do we need to forgive? Because it's a benefit to us. It benefits our health. Forgiveness offers us freedom from our past. It offers us freedom from the perpetrators, and from future victimization. Right? We learn. Forgiveness heals families and communities. We forgive so that we don't suffer physically or mentally by holding on to anger, judgment, and resentments. Reverend Jeffrey said last week that we are bound. We're bound to one another. And maybe some of us are bound to one another by birth, maybe circumstances, or even this shared thing we call humanity. We are bound by that. The simple truth is nothing cannot be, this is hard to say, nothing cannot be forgiven. And there is no one undeserving of forgiveness, because each of us needs to forgive or to be forgiven. You with me? When we forgive, it allows us to take the shackles off. The shackles that ties us to a person or an event or something that happened. Because we're all connected. Reverend Jeffrey talked about a couple weeks ago that he saw this person that had worked for him in the past, and the person was still holding on after years of anger and resentment, and he had forgotten all about it. And he's like, oh, okay, you do you. You do you, boo. So Forgiveness is a gift that we give to ourselves. All right, so today's topic is telling the story. But in order to tell the stories, we have to have memory of what happened, right? So there's two types of memories. There's the explicit memories, and that's when something happens to you. You have an explicit memory of that event. However, after we tell the story, you know, the story can kind of weave and move and change and things like that. And I'm going to use myself as an example because I know my story. So when I was 12 years old, something happened to me on Christmas Day. Not physically, but mentally. So telling that story, I told that story over and over. I was so sick of hearing me tell that story. And the story had evolved from 200 presents under the tree to 400 presents under the tree, and nothing was under the tree for me. See? How can a 12-year-old go through that? Every time I told the story, even as an adult, I became this 12-year-old telling her story. And I was in this place of unforgiveness for the perpetrator. Now, sometimes I've done some work over the years on that story, and it allowed me to say, one day I said to myself, I am not going to tell that story one more time. The whole event of the story. I'm not going to tell that story one more time. And then I found myself telling the story again. But as a 12-year-old, and now standing here before you as an adult, what did I tell myself about what that thing that happened to me? I told myself, these people don't love me. Maybe I'm unworthy of being loved. This person doesn't like me. This person did not protect me, and I'm his daughter. I'm not welcome in this home, in this family. So, that happened at 12. As an adult, what stories am I still telling myself when I feel like I'm being rejected? Maybe I'm not good enough for this job. I put in 100 applications already. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I'm not worthy of this new career, this new position, whatever it is. So you have to be able to do the work to forgive, and you got to pull out those stories that you're telling yourself, those false beliefs that we tell ourselves because something happened to us. And I know when I say to us, I'm in that first kingdom consciousness. But at 12 years old, where was I supposed to be? This happened to me. So how many times am I there in first kingdom consciousness when something happens that I don't like, I don't agree with, I feel like somebody has done something to me? It puts me right back to a 12-year-old. It puts me right back into first kingdom consciousness. And then there are the implicit memories. When we experience an event that we're not consciously aware of. For instance, when somebody says to you, do you remember when? And you're like, yeah, and maybe. Or something triggers you. In the book, it tells the story of the little girl being attacked by a dog. Every time a dog came around her, she began to flinch and become nervous. So we have to go within our own psyches and do the work and pull up those things that trigger us and figure out where that fear, where that anger, where that whatever it was comes from. Where did it come from? And then when we begin to remember the events of what happened to us, we can turn those memories from implicit memories into explicit memories. A lot of work to be done. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. So, what story are we telling ourselves? What stories are you telling? What stories, what is that recording that goes on in your head about something that happened? So when we're telling the story, we have to assemble all the pieces so we can tell the story from a place of fact and from a place of truth. Now, when you come to the point where you want to, something has been perpetrated upon you and you want to go to the person that was the perpetrator, you may find some resistance there. The person may not even realize that all these false beliefs came from that incident that happened. So you have to be careful. You have to be safe, because if you're not in a safe place where you can share that with that person, it may escalate. And become something bigger, and then not fostering the healing that you're looking for. So in those moments, what we can do is we can journal. We can write a letter, or we can find a safe person, a minister, a practitioner that you trust with your story, somewhere you're not going to be judged for what happened. And we find that here in this teaching. We find that in our practitioners here. We find that with our Reverend Jeffrey. We find that with me. You know, we can find those things that we need. You might have a really good friend. I have a really good friend that she shares with me all the time. And she knows that what she shares with me is not going to go any further. And also that it is a safe place and a safe place of non-judgment. So telling the story, putting your experience into words, allows you to process and integrate your events. It allows you to reclaim your dignity, because you may not have had control over the events of what happened. It will enable you to share your own perspective of what happened and create your own narrative of what happened. You can begin to tell your own story with the first, and that is the first step on the pathway of forgiveness. So the cost of not telling your story. What do you think the cost of not telling your story is? More pain, more fear, more victimization maybe, more false beliefs. We have to be able to tell our stories. We have to be able to share that part of us, that vulnerable part of us. We have to be able to tell from a place of truth. I know this is a tough topic this morning. But the importance of it is it frees you. You give yourself this gift that I was talking about. We say a world that works for everyone. It also can help when you tell your story, give someone else rise to tell theirs. Someone else rise to heal, to begin that healing process. All from telling your story. Take a deep breath. So, what stories are you holding on to that you need to heal? You need to get release. Reverend Jeffrey talked about last week this cycle also, this circle. There's a circle of revenge, and then there's a circle of forgiveness and reconciliation and rebuilding a relationship. And that's going to come in the later talks. But we're hardwired. In the story it says, if something happens to you and we say, okay, an eye for an eye, what happens? Both of us ends up blind. Reverend Jeffrey talked about last week, we're wired, there's a reptilian part of us that's like, you do something to me, I'm going to do something right back to you. But there's also a part of us that is compassionate, that is loving, that is caring, that wants to see the good in people and wants to give the good within us. And that's the part that we don't want to deny, we don't want a spiritual bypass. But that's the part of us that we want to begin to work with, nurture, and all that good, yummy stuff that we talk about here on Sundays. And so these tools that we give you are to choose to help us to, these tools that you're going to get in the next couple of weeks are the tools that's going to put us on the path of the journey of forgiveness. And we start this journey by first telling our story. So I'm going to stop here. We're going to go to tables, and we're going to unpack some stuff. There is a little blue thing on your table, and that's our questions for today. So please, let's dive into it. All right. I'm so proud of everyone here. Give yourself a hand. This is a brave topic. All right, so tools for thriving. So you have homework tomorrow, Ralston. So your tools for thriving is the explicit memories, and that's when you remember something that happened to you, and implicit memories. Make sure you can distinguish between the two of those. And remember that this thing called forgiveness is a gift that we give ourselves. But your tools are telling the story. So spend time this week contemplating the questions, contemplating and determining if you're experiencing explicit memory or implicit memory, and use these as journal props. Write out your story or draw a comic strip to aid you in identifying what is causing the reaction in your experience. How can you integrate the memories and heal the traumas? So your journal props is the truth behind the story you're telling. Speak the truth. Start with the facts. Tell your story first to a friend, a loved one, or a trusted person. Consider telling your story to a person who harmed you, or writing a letter. You may not ever deliver the letter. You may not be able to. They may not be on the planet anymore. But write the letter anyway. Accept that whatever has happened cannot be changed or undone. So we have to give ourselves the gift. Thank you. So what is Spirit's highest idea of this talk today? And it is to deepen ourselves in this idea of forgiveness by telling our stories. So knowing that one power, that one presence, which is God, the living Spirit Almighty, that's moving, breathing, and living in and through each and every one of us, wants us to live, love, have peace and joy in our lives by just being aware of the consciousness that it is in us as us. And I know that there's some things that happen in our lives that we're still holding on to, but Spirit is asking us, knocking at the door of wanting us to forgive ourselves, and forgive others. Each one of us is a child of that Most High. Each one of us is an individualized expression of the Most High. And so we are called today to remember that, to embody it, to surrender to it. Whatever it is that you need to do to get there, we want to get you there. Reverend Jeffrey talks about we are not the Center for Awareness. We are the Center for Spiritual Living. So we want to live this spiritual teaching in these spiritual bodies. We are spiritual beings. And so knowing this truth and offering up this surrender for forgiveness in our lives frees us. And we give ourselves the gift of love. We give ourselves the gift of heaven. We give ourselves the gift of joy. And giving ourselves that we make rise for other people to do the same. We are the living example of what Spirit is here on earth. So I invite you today to do the work, to do your journaling, your journal prompts, that know that you are richly blessed by Spirit. And Spirit wants a world that works for everyone. And it starts with each of us individually. So letting it go, letting God move through us as us, that it already is, and so it is. So let's say our affirmation together. I tell my story openly and honestly. Let's say it together. I stand up first and say it like you mean it. Together now. I tell my story openly and honestly. Something wonderful is happening through me right now. It is this thing called love. Love is in my mind. Love is in my body. Love is in everything I do. I am it. I share it. I receive it. And I move, Lord, forward because love lives here.